Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story I, 30M, hit my father, 51M, for a past mistake. I am from Peru, from a provincial city. When I was 18 years old, my cousin, who is the same age as mine, accused me of having raped her. She and I were very close since we were children, since we used to spend time together. Due to family problems, she began to have depression. It wasn't like before. Now all she did was scream, get angry, or even blame me because I didn't have the same problems as her. The truth is, I was trying to help her, but my own mental health was beginning to deteriorate, so I decided little by little to move away. Months passed and I had no contact with her until one day my father came to my house and called me. I went out to meet him and he received me with a slap in the face. It should be noted that my father had never hit me before. Who did that was my mother, and only for specific reasons. When I asked him about the reason behind the hit, he slapped me again and told me to get out of the house, that his brother, my cousin's father, had told him that my cousin said that I raped her and that's why she was so depressed. Apparently her dad realized that she was cutting herself, and to get out of it she just blamed me for everything. My cousin didn't press charges, obviously because there is no proof, but still my dad told me that my uncle wanted to beat me up. My dad was disappointed in me. He hit me again, called me an abuser, insulted me and told me to get out of his house. My mom was always a submissive person with him, so she didn't say anything to him. I simply, with my lip bleeding, grabbed my most valuable things and left. Thank God I had my savings on my card from what I had worked for, and I was able to go to the capital by public transportation. Once in the capital, I managed to rent a small room. I had a bad time for the next few years. I had a couple or two for a few years and jumping from job to survive. When I was 20 years old, my partner at that time told me that I could work at the KFC where she worked as a delivery order receptionist. The part-time job paid well, and with the bonuses you could even earn double or triple my salary, so I worked there doing the best I could while studying a technical degree in administration. Years passed and I ended up becoming a supervisor and then manager of that store thanks to my technical degree in business administration. At the age of 25, I became a partner with a former university classmate with whom I still had contact. She is a lawyer, and the age of 27 we got married. It was a small wedding because both she and I are modest with expenses, and because I had no family to invite. We currently have a 1-year-old son whom I love with all my soul. It was after this that everything went to hell. Today in the middle of the afternoon there was a knock at my door. It was my parents. It had been more than a decade since I had seen them. I was frozen, but not with fear, but with anger. My dad asked me if he could come in. I told him no, so we talked in a nearby park. In short, they told me that my cousin had committed suicide and that in her letter she confessed the whole truth, that the person who actually abused her was her mother's brother, and that everything was orchestrated by him to be able to cover up and other things. The truth is, I was very indifferent. For me, whoever accuses of those crimes deserves to suffer them in flesh, so I didn't feel sorry for her. I told them kindly, and resisting my urge to yell at them, to go away and never contact me again, that they were dead to me. When I stood up from the bench to go home, my dad grabbed me by the shoulder. He told me that we have to keep talking. I told him no. He insisted. I told him no. He insisted again. So I turned around and instinctively gave him a hit. I don't know when my dad became so weak. Any Latino knows that countrymen are quite strong, but one hit was enough to break his nose. He stood stunned looking at me with his eyes open and his nose bleeding, and my mom was covering her mouth, for some reason that I don't explain. My next reaction was to throw myself at him. It wasn't difficult to knock him to the ground, and I continued hitting him. When he started to cover his face, I started hitting his head or forehead. I'll not lie, it felt liberating. I felt like I was crying while I hit him, and I continued until my right hand was hurting. My mother stood still. For some reason she didn't do anything. She just stood there watching and crying. By that time it was already night, and in our area it was difficult to find people on the street, even less so considering that today there is a soccer game. My mom helped my dad and took a taxi. She didn't say anything to me, she didn't scream, she just cried, and as soon as she grabbed my dad she ran away. I'm not lying. If she had tried to intervene, maybe she would have gotten the same treatment. A few hours later my mother writes to me on my cell phone. Apparently they contacted a friend from university, I still have my social networks active, who told them where I lived, saying that my father needs a septum reconstruction because it was perforated in dental reconstruction for having 4 broken teeth. Everything was going to cost the equivalent of $4,000, which is a lot of money here. Not a fortune, but it's a lot. I have already been clear with her, I am not going to put in a single cent. For my sake she and my dad could end up just like my cousin. I don't care. She has been calling me, asking for forgiveness for everything, that she wants to come back into my life, that she was afraid and that she should have protected me or at least believed me. According to her my dad felt the same, and according to him he deserves every hit I gave him. I guess we agree on that. I told my wife everything. She already knew what happened in the past with my parents. She just told me that she understood, that, according to what I told her, my father died when he kicked me out of his house, so who did I hit was just a stranger with his face. I found her comparison funny and I agreed with her. She told me that if they tried legal measures we would simply say that it was in self-defense. A law was recently passed in which lethal force can even be used when it's about self-defense, so if something happens to him we can rely on that. Right now I'm glad I have a lawyer wife. I can't help but feel more liberated after this. My parents aren't poor, so I know they'll get the money for the operation. I hope they just aren't idiots enough to come back to my house. This is my home now, and if I have to beat them both to get the hell out of my life, I will. At the end of the day, they are the ones who started all this. I was just defending myself. I still feel a little euphoric and happy. The truth is, I am a little happy that they are suffering. They deserve it. I am happy with my life and my family, and I would protect them at any cost. That includes my parents. I needed to get this off my chest somehow, so I'm writing this to release it. Somehow telling it all has made me feel better. Story: abusive parent, toxic family, and high expectations, which makes me suffer endless even after being miles away. Currently, I am a 21-year-old student. I had to think of a way to escape my father because the abuse had been going on for a long time and no one in my family knew about it. I decided to study abroad because I thought it was the only way to escape, even if only for a short time. This was a decision I regretted because I was struggling in the classes of a course I didn't like at all, archaeology, which is not popular in my country, and I had to convince my family to take it. Study abroad. My parents also expected me to be the best and smartest student in the class. Since I was little, they always wanted me to study well and be smart. If my scores were bad, they would repeat that over and over again, and even if I got good scores, they still saw that they weren't perfect. They compare me with my smart friends and say I'm lazy and useless. They also forced me to study what they wanted after class 10. When I finished my studies, they put me in an engineering field that I begged them not to choose. I failed my classes and kept it a secret until a professor told my dad everything. Things got worse and I had to beg them to let me study another major, and finally they agreed to let me study history. After a year I endured in engineering. My grades dropped dramatically in 10th grade, which is when I realized I was being abused by my father. I hate it, I feel disgusting. I had to pretend everything was fine at school and at home. No one knew. I didn't dare tell my friends because I was afraid they would consider me dirty. I couldn't sleep without locking the door because I was afraid he would do something. I always have to keep an eye on where he is, or I will lose control for fear of what he will do when no one is there. I try to stay near or around other family members. I'm very afraid of him. Even now, I still feel like he is watching me and sometimes touching me even though I am thousands of miles away from him, which makes me always in a state of tension and unable to concentrate, happy or even relaxing. All my favorite things like books, reading time and car rides were ruined because he did something there and I felt like all the things I loved were tainted. Plus, my father has an influential job, so I couldn't seek help legally or from any organization back home. My family also moved many times, so I always had difficulty making friends. I rarely talked to others. To add salt to the wound, they let my younger brother do whatever he wanted. He played cricket and was very serious about it. They let him choose easy subjects for higher classes and the course he wanted for college, while I had to give up badminton, which I had played for 7 years in 10th standard. Because I'm not good at studying. I don't hate my younger brother because that's when family feels like real family, when I can play with him, talk about things we like and simply be brothers with fun games and competitions. Argued, while my dad was terrible and my mom criticized my grades and weight, calling me lazy all the time. In February 2023, near the end of the final semester of my undergraduate history major, there was talk about studying abroad and I jumped at the opportunity because I felt it was the only way I could escape from my father. They paid for my tuition and accommodation in the new country. But I feel useless here because I don't know what to study. I felt useless and stupid among other students and I felt very bad. I sought out a mental health counselor in college because psychotherapy became accessible for the first time. I still endure it because I have to call my parents every day. They make me feel guilty every time, saying they paid a lot of money, should study hard, get a job, and my mother talked about marrying someone and I should finish my master's program and PhD before age 25. I just want to drop out of college and run away sometimes. All I want is a simple job, not a high-end job like my parents want. All my life I wanted a small job, small things, and a simple life. I feel like I made the stupidest decision to come here because I didn't know how to study or even get a job. I only had 1 year in this country and I was always afraid that I would be sent home. I was tired and afraid that my father would find out I was failing my classes again. I can't go to class and face students and professors. Even though I've been here for 4 months, I still haven't made any friends. I do not know what to do. I can't live alone, have no job, no money, and no visa to do it. I want to stay in this country and try to get by, but I have no way to do that. How can I get away from my parents and only keep in touch with my younger brother? I'm afraid that if they find out, they'll do something to me, or they'll kick me out on the street and talk bad about me with my younger brother and other family members and friends. I can't tell anyone, that's why I'm venting here. Story, talk about family stories. I am a 17-year-old girl, but my father doesn't treat me right. I don't know why, but if he owes my brother just $2, he will find a way to give him that money right away. But with me, he's been owing me for a year and has never decided to pay me back. It's like he's saying, "You're my daughter, so I'm not going to pay you back." Isn't my brother your son too? How does that make sense? Every time there's something to do, it's always me. He says girls are supposed to be learning to do household chores and stuff, and I do it. But when it comes to my brother, he's like, no, he's a boy, he cannot do it. That's really biased, in my opinion. He's choosing boys over girls. The way he treats my brother is way different than how he treats me. I am the eldest child in our family, and my brother is the second after me. My father doesn't like me, because if my brother says, "Dad, I need some money," he'd be like, "I'll try to find a way to get you something." And then the next day, he comes up and brings him money, maybe the exact amount or even more. But when I ask for something, it's so difficult. One time, I have never touched even $50 from him. In order for me to get the money, I have to ask him every day, every single day, and he still does not want to give it to me. I have never touched $100 from my father in my life. If I get something, it has to be for school. But if it's for myself, I'll never get anything. Now I have graduated in 2024, and I still have got nothing from him. He didn't even go to my graduation. He didn't attend any of our graduations. Now that I've graduated, in order for me to get a job that I want, they told me I needed a bank account. But I'm still underage, so I was asking my father if he could help me get a bank account. He told me on my graduation day, but 2 weeks have passed, and I know he does not want to do it. He thought I would be like my mother. He thinks that I'm going to take all his nonsense like my mother did. Well, I'm not going to do that. He thinks that I'm gonna stay at home and just do women's chores and all those things. No, I'm going to be a big woman. I won't be like my mother, staying home and cooking for him all day while he treats her like trash. No, I'm not going to be like my mother. I'm going to be better. Story, I hate fucking dad. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and my husband is 27. He's really into fitness and goes to the gym regularly, while I've been struggling to get back in shape after having our baby boy a year ago. Recently, we went on a family holiday with my side of the family. My husband got along really well with everyone, especially my aunt, who's 47 and also very fit. She goes to the gym a lot too. My husband has always had some unusual gym-related fantasies, asking me to do things like lift weights in front of him. After Easter at my grandparents' house, most of the family went to my uncle's place, leaving only a few of us behind. My grandparents have a small, rarely used in-house gym that one of my uncles built. While I was feeding our son, my husband disappeared with my aunt for about half an hour, saying she was going to show him some workout techniques. Feeling uneasy, I asked my mom to watch the baby so I could see what they were up to. I found them in the gym, with my husband lying on the floor and my aunt squatting weights above him, her bum right over his face. Both of them swore they haven't cheated or had sex and begged me not to tell anyone. After speaking to my aunt later, she informed me that my husband wanted me to stand on his balls and squat but refused, saying it was weird. Well, should I divorce my husband? Story, I was right about my stepdad. My mom got married to this guy after only knowing him in person for one day before getting engaged. I had a really difficult time with this guy because he was constantly making sexual innuendos to me about my mom and in general, behind her back. He played cruel mental games with me and my siblings. He was physically abusive as well, mostly to my youngest brother. But to my mom and the people in his circle, he displayed himself as an aging bachelor who always wanted a family. Everyone saw him as this kind, family-oriented, would do anything for ya kind of guy. He controlled this narrative that I was a messed-up kid who was into boys, alcohol, and drugs. I barely experimented at 13, so minuscule it was laughable, so he had to keep a tight leash on me. I would try and tell my mom about how cringe he was, and she would always blow me off. After an especially brutal incident with my little brother, I reported it to a teacher at my school. Because of his good old boy reputation, and how he represented me as a troubled teen trying to cause drama, no one did anything about it, and he actually threatened to kill me if I opened my mouth again. The happiest day of my life is when he requested to be transferred out of the country to make more money. He eventually divorced my mom, but before he did we had found this really explicit letter that a woman had written to him about how much she loved him raping her and how all she wanted in life was to be his sex slave. She went on and on about all the rough things she wanted him to do to her, and how often she thought of all the wild sex they had many years prior. She said she loved him and wanted to leave her husband to be with him, even knowing that he was married. My mom just gave me the rest of the letters she found over 25 years ago, and it was revealed that all of the letter writers talk about the wild sex that they had was when she was a young teen at summer camp, and he was her camp counselor. He was having rough, wild sex with a young teenage girl at summer camp when he was an adult. It makes me sick to my stomach to know that this is who I had been exposed to as a young girl at the time myself. My mom barely knew him and left me to live with him by myself for months. This also supported a suspicion I had that he had a sexual relationship with a girl I went to high school with, while we were 15 at the time. I didn't have proof, but I remember he had a secret meeting with her parents and all of a sudden she wasn't at school anymore. After he divorced my mom, she had found a pay stub showing he was paying child support for a kid we had no idea about. Long story short, this guy always gave me the ick. I was always uncomfortable around him and pleaded with my mom to see how sick he was, but no one would believe me. I was right all along. I went down a rabbit hole today trying to see if he ended up with the summer camper turned erotica/SM writer. She actually ran for a political position a few years after the letters were written. She has no idea where those letters are now. She has very specific handwriting. I would never publish these and expose her, but I can't help but think about how she has no idea of where these sensitive letters are. Story: an incomplete portrait of a girl who died. You were never technically given a curfew. You always hated leaving the house, and your mom said this is why you instead had outside hours. So, at 16, when you come home at 3 in the morning, you're surprised to see light pouring out upstairs from the kitchen. A sign she's waiting up. You told her you were going to a bonfire and you likely wouldn't be back until after 2 because your friend would need to sober up to drive you home. Normally this would have placated your mom, but there she is, waiting for you. You suddenly feel elated, and this time it's not just because you're high. You're actually eager for a conversation with your mom, even if she's clearly gearing up to lecture you. You walk upstairs to the kitchen. She's at the table, eyeing you warily. A robe thrown over her pajamas, and her curls spilling messily over her shoulders. Her hair is rarely unstraightened and you feel closer to her when she leaves it be. So? She asks while you get a glass of water. What? She shakes her head at you and pulls a sour face as if you should know what she means. Did you get my text? Your heart rolls roaring thunder. Every fight mom picks is to the death. It's exhilarating. You never know what's going to be pulled out of you, or what you're going to get from her. Sometimes it's even a little funny, but only to the two of you. You pad your hoodie down. It's winter and you probably need a real coat, but you haven't earned enough from babysitting to buy one yet. Your phone is an ice block in your pocket and you're completely unsurprised that it's dead. Sorry, you shrug at her, phone died. She pouts, and you're confused. She sighs and tightens her robe as you deflate. I asked you to get me Oreos and Pepsi. I was really looking forward to it. She doesn't have anything else to say to you. She goes down to the garage for a smoke. You think about joining her, but you have this aching pit in your stomach. At 12 you are a rabbit, caught in a trap waiting for the hunter to break your neck. Your eyes are wild. Your eyes are dead. Your grandfather's heart underneath you is almost as frantic as your own. His head turned towards the television. You look at your grandmother lying next to him, and she looks right back at you. Her mouth is a tight line and her eyes are wet. You try to press your thoughts, mostly pleased to get you out of here, into her head. Herman. Your grandmother says with her voice soft and her eyes wandering to his hand at the small of your back. It's time for bed. The next morning he teaches you to shoot. You are surprised by the feel of the gun. Warm as a baby bird and heavy as a stone. It strains your arms and you can't escape the thought that this was made to kill someone. You think of how a bullet rips through flesh when you're eyeing the paper target. You don't want to be here or do this, but what you want hardly matters. When you pull the trigger, the gun kicks back, the sound snaps your ears, your heart beats its fists against your chest, and you miss the fucking shot. You cry. Grandfather says you are weak. You try to breathe, even out, but your eyes wander to the treeline and you cry so hard your throat is raw. You are 5 and your great cousin Michael wraps duct tape around your wrists. He is quiet, intense, and almost reverent in his task. His pale cheeks flushed, watery blue eyes screwed in concentration, and the white blonde hairs on his arms stand up. It's the first time in a couple days you've had someone this focused on you. You watch the motions when you can no longer look at his face. The few glimpses you got were so different from how he usually is. Gone the impish mask of childhood and fixed the stare of a man attempting to break through a 10-year-old. You and he are one in the same. Cycling through your ages the way other children cycle through their moods. You don't say anything, and neither does your great aunt when she opens the car door with a bag of dog food balanced on her hip. You lose most of the summer you're 16 to a friend's bedroom. You and your mom have been fighting, but this has been true for years. You don't even remember why you don't get along, but she always insists you started it. Things that don't change don't matter. Nothing feels like it matters because time doesn't exist in this bedroom. The walls are plain white, the one window is covered up, and you and your friend never sleep when you're supposed to. The two of you alternate between writing, reading, watching movies, and in many ways this is the safest you've felt in years. But there is an edge to this comfort. You had left to stay the night, just one night, last month. You don't particularly enjoy leaving home because you never know when you'll be allowed back. Every time you ask you get the same answers. Let me enjoy my free time. I'm not ready to be a mom again. Just wait until Jonah leaves for the slope, then you can come back. You have not asked to go home in a week. You will not be asking any time soon. You don't usually have anything to say when you're told no anyways. Your friend's mom does eventually, after 2 months, grow tired of being expected to raise someone else's kid. Your mom still doesn't pick you up. Instead she sends Jonah. Jonah is her husband and you have never seen him sober. He is drinking a beer when he pulls into your friend's driveway. You don't want to get in the car with him, but you know you have no other choice. Your mom was pretty clear that if you don't get in the car with him you'll have to figure out your own place to sleep or ride home. It feels like a test. Jonah decides to spend the car ride drinking and talking about how much your mom loves you and your younger sibling. Every adult in your life feels the need to remind you of this and it gets less convincing every time. Jonah doesn't even seem to believe it himself because he suddenly lurches into a new conversation. About parents, and disappointment, and how in the end we fall into certain patterns. For him it was consuming anything in sight that could take him out of his head. He tells you he doesn't want you to go there. Your stomach aches thinking about the things you've already done. You wonder which part of the car you'll be sitting in at his age. 9-year-olds are not supposed to want to die. You know this because your mom told you that was the age when she first had suicidal thoughts. You know this because now you are 9 and you fantasize about death almost every day. You were told by the school to see a therapist even though you never admitted your thoughts to anyone. Your mom doesn't like your therapist. Your mom says she is delusional and focuses too much on your mom and not enough on the absence of your biological father. After every session your mom rants on and on about how this woman can't know you, doesn't have the facilities to help you, and will make you worse than you already are. Privately you think that you enjoy seeing your therapist because every time you see her there is 1 hour of your day just about you. You only get it once a week and for a while you enjoy it. But when you start to feel close to her something strange happens. She sees you off like she always does and your stomach drops. Your brain forces a horrifying thought. That this is all a ruse, an excuse to touch you, and as you turn away in shame you simultaneously cycle through images of her touching you. You ask your mom to stop seeing your therapist. Every reason you give is something your mom said. She is so triumphant it makes your throat tight. You can't remember anyone else touching you before, but you are so certain it will happen again. 16 is the first time you get drunk. You are stranded in your friend's room and still about a month away from going home. You're not worried about being drunk around your friend. You are worried about your thoughts. Vaults in your mind groan against the memories locked away in them. They feel ancient and forbidden, yawning and exhausted from the effort of withholding. You can pick apart different sections of your early childhood memories. Things that had not been accessible to you at home, where you are always worried or angry or hurt. None of them make sense. Each of them is behind a camcorder lens that makes them feel unreal. You remember watching Power Rangers after daycare at a friend's house. The bonfire your great-aunt made to melt all of your cousin's treasures that were too similar to witchcraft. Cheyenne. Herman. Michael. It takes so many sips before you feel drunk. Before those memories slip into the tightly locked vaults you keep in your head. There is no freedom, but there is some strange emptiness, and that alone brings you so much relief. I don't like being alone with him. You say at 5 years old one night over the fire, while your mom and your great-aunt and uncle balance stemless wine glasses on the arms of their camping chairs. You are of course talking about your grandfather, who is not really your grandfather. It's the touching, right? Asks your cousin, Michael, the blonde one. His expression urges you to continue. Every adult circled around the fire goes still except your mom. Your great-uncle, your great-aunt, and your uncle's faces harden under the warm glow. The only one here with any blood relation to you is your mother, and on some level you're aware that she sets the tone for how they all respond to you. The sun hovers over you, and your other brunette cousin pokes at the fire with sharp sticks. The lake shimmers in the distance and the trees whistle in the wind. Your blonde cousin stares at you from over the fire. He is thinner, paler, perceived more feminine than the other, and his watery blue eyes twinkle with a recognition that makes you uncomfortable. Yeah. You admit softly, and your entire body tenses when your mom's cackle echoes off the trees. She stares right at you. Her face twists between agony and joy and anger. Her cheeks in the full blush of booze and her eyes alight with a mischief that almost seems innocent. In these moments she's much more child than mother, and you know without knowing that she's not seeing you. Well, Herman does like M. Young. Cheyenne, your great-aunt's face is strained and her voice is soft. It's true. Your mom spins and rounds to your uncle. He loses interest when they hit puberty. She says something else, and no matter when you try to recount it, the moment is lost. Your great-aunt tries to shush your mom and your uncle walks away without saying a word. Your mom needs to be consoled, and if you speak now you're just taking another thing away from her. In between your great-aunt and uncle's home and your grandparents' home is a stretch of woods. They made a path illuminated by Christmas lights. At night you dream of this stretch. The branches reach out and whip across your face, the roots come up and trip you as you try to make your escape, and every time you try to get up the world spins and spins and spins until you fall back down. You hear beasts growling in the woods and you feel teeth close around your ankles and you try to scream but nothing comes out. You have this dream until you're 27 years old. Story: the weirdest thing after a traffic accident. This true story happened in southern Thailand in the late 2019, few months before the world has turned upside down with the pandemic and all. And I was driving north in my 2014 Chevy Cruze that felt new and pristine up to that fateful day. A renegade motorbike slid down neatly under the front bumper of my car, like tucking your shirt inside the pants. It happened so fast that even my mom, who was sitting in the front passenger's seat, did not fully comprehend what happened despite of my several attempts to explain to her. We were traveling on a 2-lane country road with only one lane available for either direction of the traffic, when a silver car, a Nissan Almera of a recent model, from the opposing traffic hit the brakes to avoid hitting someone or something, but the motorbike that was immediately behind the silver car had failed to avoid the collision. The motorbike hit the driver's side of the silver car, and it ejected its rider into the middle of the road before falling on its side and traveling few yards, into my side of the road. I did manage to bring my car into a full stop just before the wheels of the motorbike went under the front bumper in a small thud. It felt less than a collision, and more of plugging a wire into an electrical outlet. A lot had happened in the next few minutes. My mom was frantic and in the "I told you so" mode. She hysterically blamed me for driving too fast and too recklessly. The driver of the silver car decided to move her car into a nearby gas station. And I saw an ambulance staff running on foot to the unconscious rider in the middle of the road. I was shushing my mom, telling her that the accident was not my fault, and I tried to commit the license plate of the silver car into memory because I thought that it was fleeing from the scene, and I was puzzled of how quickly the first responders managed to reach the unconscious rider long before I could. All at the same time. It turned out that the ambulance happened to be there and en route to a nearby sport/school event, and the ambulance crew were having a brunch break when the accident took place right in front of them. Meanwhile, the driver of the silver car decided to move her car, and she parked it at a nearby gas station 10 to 20 meters/yards away. Please don't ask me why the duck she did that, because this is not the weirdest thing to happen on that day. My mom couldn't help herself but shouting stuff like "you hit that poor boy," or "the boy is dead because of you." And to most people, a different story was being told, that somehow I was driving recklessly and I hit the motorbike in a head-on collision that made the rider fly high into the air some 2 to 5 meters/yards ahead of my car. And the fact that my mom was accusing me of being reckless did not help at all. The rider of the motorbike was knocked out cold and he was not wearing a helmet, as the law dictates, but just when the ambulance crew were about to log-roll his body, to slowly turn the body with minimal risk of further neck/spine injuries, the rider suddenly gained consciousness, and he made some active efforts to sit on his knees. PFFFFFFFFFFT. He was fine, except for some minor abrasions over the elbows and arms, and over the right cheek. He eventually managed to stand on his own, but his speech pattern was disorganized and it was causing a lot of concerns among the first responders, so the ambulance crew decided to take him to a nearby hospital for a checkup with the provisional diagnosis of cerebral concussion (CC) to rule out any significant head injuries. This is the norm in Thailand, and most Thai citizens are not concerned about any medical or hospital fees. Most hospital fees are symbolic except for certain items, like cosmetic surgery. And with a full GCS of 15/15, a medical checkup was most probably going to be very brief. As I suspected, it turned out later that the kid, barely a 19 years old, was the shy type who just got himself into a lot of trouble. He borrowed his friend's motorbike without having a valid driving license nor an insurance on him, which is the norm in southern Thailand. And now 2 cars and a motorbike were damaged. He was simply overwhelmed by everything that was happening around him. 2 policemen came up to him, and they took some basic information before he was taken to the hospital. And then, they immediately went for the silver car's owner to interrogate her because apparently, you are not supposed to move your car from the scene of an accident before everything was documented. This pisses off people, the police people or otherwise. Someone got hurt requiring medical help equals potentially a crime scene. The damage to both cars was mostly cosmetic, with 1 fog light and 1 tail light were smashed. And both cars would need some paint job. The motorbike itself was in a good condition to be driven on its own power. I mean, yes, there was a motorbike tucked under the front bumper of my car and it did look really bad from far, but no, really it wasn't that bad, like an uninjured baby gazelle under the hold of a friendly lion. The people in southern Thailand are known for their morbid curiosity, so people started to park on the sides of the road to inquire about what happened. Soon a crowd grew around my car and the motorbike underneath. And someone actually had the audacity to sell some nuts and other snacks next to my car, again, a common scene in southern Thailand. I personally blame the local TV. If we only had more interesting TV programs and more interesting shows, then the people here would not be this bored. I stopped answering their relentless interrogation because the questions quickly turned personal and incredibly annoying. Where do you live? Where are you going? How much you paid for your car? Do you know this guy who lives in your neighborhood? He is my brother-in-law who is married to my oldest sister. Are you married? And how many kids do you have? I shit you not. And as much we have people who are morbidly curious, we also have people who are desperately looking for attention and validation. How do they do that, you may ask? by appointing themselves as the official speaker for the accident, or by acting as a news reporter to the audience who were there. One man took one side of the crowd to tell his version of the events, and another man took the other side of the crowd telling a slightly more exciting version of the events. And while it was fun to see who got the most details wrong, they were completely destroyed, to smithereens, by an old man who was 5x more energetic, 10x black belt holder in the ancient art of bullshitting, and 100% wrong about all the details. He quickly grabbed everyone's attention. He used sound effects of explosions from his mouth, and he even ran across the road to add some action into his already compelling story. And he was probably 50 or 60 years old. He was truly impressive. He was so compelling that I got intrigued, considering that I was literally in the front seats of the accident when it happened. I did try to interrupt him few times. Please uncle, this is not how it happened. In our local Malay language, we often use titles of endearment with strangers like uncle, auntie, younger brother or older sister, and we use pronouns of respect when we address people. But on the other side of the spectrum, we also have pronouns of disrespect and showing our disapproval to people. Be quiet, your mom had already admitted that it was all your fault. In our local Malay language, we have 3 levels of pronouns for respect: respectful, neutral, and disrespectful for pronouns like I or you, and he chose to use all the pronouns of disrespect while addressing me. And dude, he was adamant, so we all know how he was driving recklessly at high speed, and the poor kid, who is barely older than a child, was hit violently from behind, and he was flown high into the air the way to this very spot. And the poor kid was sent to the hospital in bad conditions, fighting for his life, and I do not know whether he's going to make it or not. At this point, he managed to shut me down 3 times when I tried to correct him. And he started to have these crazy eyes despite the fact that he was older, shorter, and much smaller than me. And the fact that even my own mom was not 100% sure of what really happened had discouraged me from asking for her help. So there I was, standing miserably next to my, no longer pristine, car with arms crossed over my chest, and looking far at the 2 policemen and the woman driver of the silver car with dissatisfaction. That is when they finally started walking towards my car. I didn't know it at the time, but they were trying to transfer the dashcam video from the silver car into their phones to prove that the female driver had to make an emergency stop as some random kids ran chasing each other right in front of the silver car. They eventually gave up and simply pointed their phone camera at the small screen of the dashboard. This is why they took their sweet time to finally get to my car. I instinctively started walking towards the policeman because, well, because I thought that it was the most polite thing to do, to go and meet them halfway. The old man walked right past me, and I actually shouted in English, "What the hell?" I walked faster. And he started to walk faster. And before I knew it, we were racing and grabbing each other's arm, all shouting, "Uncle! You weren't even here when it all happened. Someone must tell them of what really happened. My nephew is at the hospital because of you." We started pushing each other, not with hands and arms, but with chests and shoulders. So okay, he was older. He was probably 70 kilograms, 155 pounds, and I was 110 kilograms, 242 pounds. And he was short, he was up to my chin, and I was 171 centimeters, 5 feet 8 inches, not devastatingly tall but taller. And all I could see at the time was this white blinding light of anger, and one dark dumb thought that if I kept my arms and my hands high in the air, the 2 policemen would clearly see that I was not carrying any weapons on me while I was challenging this old man into this non-sexual IDKWTF contest. And the old man did the same with his hands and arms, like in Monkey See Monkey Do, although to be fully honest, I am not 100% sure who lifted his hands and arms high into the sky first. So let me ask you, am I the butthole AIT? The 2 policemen quickly pulled us apart. And finally the old man was told that his nephew, by marriage and not by blood relations, was doing well the last time they spoke to him. The old man's face simply lit up like a child receiving her Christmas gift AITA for keeping the "I will strangle you" face all the time while looking at him. The policeman explained what happened to my mother as well, with me repeating in the background, "I told ya. I told ya. I bloody told you." The policeman invited us, all the parties involved, to their precinct for some tea and biscuits, and also to file up a police report because in the eyes of the law, someone did get hurt. And within 60 to 90 minutes, the 19-year-old kid, the rider of the motorbike, came in with his parents and with the real owner of the motorbike, all apologetic and all smiling awkwardly. The police had determined that it was the kid's fault for driving too close to the silver car in front of him, and he was ordered to pay for the repairs. He was also given a fine for not having a driving license, which was a modest fine and essentially a slap on the wrist. So there we were laughing and we were about to leave, when the silver car's driver announced suddenly and right out of the blue, from the kindness of her big heart, that she will bear some of the responsibility for the accident, and that she will help the 19-year-old kid with the cost of the repairs. And almost immediately, all eyes turned at my mom and I. Well, on me mostly. A moment of silence went by, all eyes on me, before I sheepishly answered, "Oh, how generous of you." I will. I will text you the estimate, the quote, for the repairs as soon as I have it." I could feel the warmth as my face turned red like a tomato. But seriously, if I had a time machine, I would probably go back and answered her more confidently right there and then, "Screw the both of you. You two had ruined my car and ruined my entire day, so both of you are going to bear the full cost of repairs." Ida? Just a tiny detail. As we were about to leave the police station or the precinct, I honestly cannot tell you the difference. I had a quick glance at the office of the highest ranking officer at that precinct, the station's chief or the highest ranking's office. I also cannot read the ranks on their shoulders or based on their uniforms, but the older gentleman looked more senior and looked more important, the more authoritative type, compared to other officers. And there he was laughing and jiggling in his big nice office, and sharing some cupcakes and some tea with the old man. Sigh. Yes, it's him again. The same old man from 2 hours earlier. Dude, what a hell? I was not even aware that he had followed us all the way to the precinct up to that point. Story, ready to move on from my mom. 19F ready to cut my mom out of my life. I know it sounds bad, but I'm done with my mom. She always plays the victim, and I feel like she really doesn't care about me. Let me start with the time we had a fight. My mom and I fought about her birthday. I couldn't attend because she wanted to have it in another city, and I was at home feeling sick and also on my period. I called my mom to wish her a happy birthday and told her I couldn't attend because I didn't feel good. She didn't say anything, just said okay and hung up on me, so I didn't think much about it. When my mom came back home, she didn't talk to me and ignored me. I left her alone and went to bed. She came into my room and started yelling about how I'm a bad daughter, that I'm never there for her, and never want to do anything for her. I ignored her because I was tired, and it was really late, so I didn't want to argue. The next day, she gave me the silent treatment, so I left her alone and went to school. When I came back, she started to argue with me about her birthday, saying I was the only one who didn't come. Also, my mom has a girlfriend, and she was saying stuff about how weird it was for me not to come to my mom's birthday. I ignored all of it because I wasn't in the mood to argue. Later that day, my mom called my uncle and talked about how ungrateful and bad I was. She put her phone on speaker so my uncle could talk to me. My uncle started screaming at me, saying I should have gone to her birthday. Keep in mind that I was sick and had cramps, and the party was in another city, about 1 hour and 50 minutes away by train, sometimes even 2 hours. My uncle didn't let me talk and kept cutting me off, so I ignored them and did my own thing. She kept going about how bad I was, so I called my boyfriend because I didn't want to stay home anymore and just wanted to go out for a couple of hours to have some peace. My mother came into my room and said if I left, I wouldn't be welcome anymore and that she would throw me out. I was talking with my boyfriend on the phone and just went to bed with him on the phone. There's so much I can tell you. For example, my mom's girlfriend has two children, 17 and 12 years old. There was a time I needed a new laptop for school because mine was broken, so I asked my mom if I could have one. She told me she didn't have any money, so she couldn't get me one. I let it go and called my boyfriend to talk about my laptop and how my mom couldn't afford it. I asked my boyfriend if he could lend me some money so I could get one, and he did. I bought my laptop. A while later, one of my mom's girlfriend's children had a birthday, and he wanted an expensive present, a steering wheel for a game that cost $450. She bought it for him. Mind you, she said she didn't have any money when I asked her. I know y'all could say maybe she didn't have it at that time, but I asked her so many times, and she bought it the same day and came home laughing about it. That happened a few months ago. Recently, I cooked some rice because I was hungry, and I just made it for one person because my mom always yells at me if I make too much rice, saying it's a waste. That day, my boyfriend came to visit, and we were on the couch watching movies. My mom came downstairs and started screaming about why I didn't make enough rice. I ignored her because my boyfriend was there, and I was a little embarrassed. She kept talking about how bad I was and saying I was selfish. She also talked about my boyfriend in front of him, saying he wasn't welcome anymore. My boyfriend is the sweetest person and always kind to my mom, helping her a lot. I felt bad for him when she said all that. My mom also wished I was dead or that she had aborted me. I started crying, and my boyfriend hugged me, making me feel safe for a moment. When he left, I went to my room as fast as I could and went to bed. I'm always outside at my boyfriend's house or my best friend's house because there's always a problem when I'm home with my mom, and I don't feel like staying home. I don't feel safe at my own house. I'm writing this because an hour ago, my mom came into my room and told me she was leaving for a couple of days because I'm a bad daughter and she doesn't understand why I'm like this. I was just in my room watching some TikToks, so I looked at her confused and asked what I did. She raised her voice, saying I'm bad, ungrateful, and treat her like sh*t, asking what she did to deserve this. I was so confused because I didn't do anything, didn't even raise my voice. I hate it here and hate that she always says those things. I'm not even bothering her and never asked to be born. She also wishes that if I have kids, they treat me wrong and that karma gets me because I treat her wrong. I don't get what I'm doing. My mom is a hypocrite, narcissist, and manipulator. Story: The best days of my life. A little backstory. When I was 10, my parents divorced. My mom had drug problems by then, and my dad cheated on her. I don't know which caused which. I don't know if the family court was so exceedingly against men that they rather gave me to my drug addict mom than let my father take me, or if she managed to hide it. But there we were. A single mom raising a boy. Meanwhile, my brother was taken by my dad at my mother's request. The next 4 years was the worst years of my entire life. My therapist said, "Bury it in the past, and pile good memories on them so they may never be seen." So I am not going into any details about it. Instead, I will write based on the title. The best 2 days of my life. The day that she died, and the day of her funeral. I had a nice long sleep, which was already odd. Usually she woke me up early, but not this time. I don't know why, but I felt somehow better than usual. For many hours I was just having fun in the house. Then I heard her telephone ring, and I was exceedingly scared. But the phone just rang and rang. I carefully opened her door and saw her lying on the bed, surrounded with some empty syringes, and not moving. As I looked at her for a while, I noticed that she is not breathing. It took a while to click in, but then I was just joyfully jumped. This was a dream come true. I went to her phone, searched for my dad's number, and for the first time since our separation called him. I remember yelling in joy that she died. She finally died. My mother is no more. He was shocked in the phone, calling a bad joke, but then I said it's not joke. It's finally over. Then I asked to help me burn the corpse, because it's heavy, and I don't want to burn inside the house." He called the cops and came to the house himself as well. I remember the cops being very distressed the way I acted. A single mom died, and the child is smiling and celebrating. It was clear on their face that they are very uncomfortable with the situation, but I just couldn't stop smiling. I overheard them speaking that I am a future serial killer. Hours later, my father arrived. He was very shocked that the police was still there gathering evidence. He lived far away. By then I told the cops everything I knew. He was shocked when the police told that they found a lot of drugs and he can't go in because the case is under investigation. Then he looked at me as I was still smiling. The only way I could describe his face was terror. I don't know what he was thinking about the situation, but he just took me to my new home. He tried to ask me while I was smiling, but I never answered. I just couldn't. He knew something was wrong, but not pried into it. Sometimes later came the funeral. It didn't end in an exactly happy way, but it was still a great day to me. A final goodbye to the most evil and vile person I ever knew. I had the same crazy smile I had on the day she died. Many people commented on it. My uncle said that I look like a serial killer. My aunt said that it must be the way I cope. My cousin said that I look like the Joker. It must have been very odd to everyone. People being sad, and some women crying, and the child of this person smiling the whole time. Later I was asked to say something in front of the crowd. My head was full of thoughts, but in the end all I was said. "Good riddance." And then I started laughing like never before, or since. The purest joy a person can have. My dad quickly took me away, and he was angry. He asked, "What's wrong with you? Why did you say something like this?" Then I looked him in the eyes, and for the first time since the funeral started I had a serious face. I said, "After everything she done to me, I wish I killed her myself." Then he had the same face when he looked at me the first time, celebrating back on that day. That same terror. As if it were written on his face. What this kid has become. Then all he asked is to be silent from now on, and let the others mourn. He knew at that point that something went horribly wrong during my time with her. I put my smile back and obliged. For now. Later on, after her coffin was put into the ground, everyone including me was given a flower. I saw the people throwing it into the hole as a final goodbye, but I didn't go. When only I was there with the flower, my dad asked me to give my goodbye. I walked up to the grave and looked down. Then I turned around to the crowd and yelled, "She does not deserve this. She does not deserve any of this." Everyone was shocked. There was some yelling. Then my dad came to me, and everyone fell silent. He asked, "How can I say this? What she has done to me?" It was the first time anyone ever asked. For the whole time everyone was thinking that something is wrong with me, but nobody bothered to ask. Why? Why I behave like this? Why I hate her so much? And then I told everything as loud as I could speak. The beatings, the ***UAL abuses, the drugs, and my attempted suicide. Everything. By the end of it I fell on my knees crying. I don't remember the faces. I couldn't see through the tears. My dad hugged me and told, "Let's just go home." But I couldn't. I was just kneeling there paralyzed. Then someone else picked me up. I believe it was my uncle. He took me into my dad's car and we went home. There was no more speaking that day. By the time we arrived, I pulled myself together enough to walk into my bed and cried myself into sleep. Story, Regrets and Isolation. Today's the birthday of my late father. I used to call him Baba, the Bengali term for father. It's not that I was waiting for this day. I just woke up in the middle of the night for the washroom, and after I tried to get back into my pity dreams, I was struck by today's date of September 1st. Initially I was like, something's today, but I can't remember what exactly it is. not long before I realized it was the birthday of one of my loved ones, who loved me back. Well, I'm a 30-year-old guy based in Bengaluru, recently left my only job where I was earning just 5.6 LPA per month, not enough for me to live a decent life in such an expensive city. Now I left it, so what's ahead? Nothing I know of, don't have any contacts to support me in this situation. I always had colleagues and no friends back at work, owing to the social skills that got me here. Now with no job, no friends, no family, well actually I realized and no one cares about my existence. Well, I wasn't like that always, rewind 10 years, to my college life at one of the most prestigious universities, pursuing one of the most lucrative streams, computer science. I had friends back then even though I struggled to start conversations. My poor social skills, often pointed out by others, were one of my worries, but no matter how I tried, I failed. I accept the fact that I didn't get the best of friends because of this, all I got were extremely competitive or extremely light friends. I got trapped in between, was never able to scam my life, and just got pushed and crushed by the crowd. During my time at college, I had a loving family, but unfortunately, I didn't realize their importance in my life. Calling them every day at 9:30 was like a task that needed to be done. Never talked nicely to them, not like I was very arrogant or whatever, it was like I just answered whatever they asked in a yes/no manner, telling nothing about what was going on with me, or any interesting stories that they expected from me. Unlike my friends who were fully frank and expressive with their parents, I didn't feel right that time to share anything, for as I expected I might get a scolding in return, like lying to them about having food a mess. When things got worse in life, with poor academic performance and poor relationships, instead of getting emotional support from them, I did the opposite. I felt I could handle everything independently, and I stopped talking to them after repetitive missed calls, which frustrated me. Used to yell at them, thought they wouldn't be of any help to get me out of here. My parents were very sad at that time, not because he had to pay hefty fees despite my poor performance, but only because they weren't able to talk to the playful and honest child that I once used to be. That made my parents emotionally unstable, I guess. I had a small brother also, who grew up watching all these. We shared so much love for each other before I came to college, but now he sees these things happening to his parents. Our bond loosened. It was the 4th year of my college. The second cycle of placement season was going on and I kept getting rejected because of my poor CV and grades. The placements ended, leaving me unemployed. Now I was more hesitant to talk to my parents, ashamed to even show my face to my friends. I thought of how disappointed my parents would be if they got to know about this, as they expected a lot from me before admitting me into this college. Little did I know how worse things were back at home. I got a call from an unknown number. I picked it up. It was my little brother giving me the news of my father's demise. He passed away due to heart failure, probably due to high emotional strain, provided he already had existing problems. I felt like a murderer. I hung up the call, completely blank and numb for some time straight. Then I had a panic attack, and the next thing I remember was I woke at the medical center. Everything flashed back once again, and I had another attack. My friends were sitting beside me, they knew what had happened. I felt ashamed for reasons unknown this time. I cried and cried and cried. I was given medications and discharged. Everyone was leaving college to get to their jobs. I, on the other hand, was confused as to whether to go back home, or will they accept me, but also wanted to see my father for the last time, even though it was his dead body. I was never able to deliver the love and respect he deserved. Without uttering a word to anyone back in college, I left, no goodbyes to anyone, and I never looked back. I reach home, and everything's devastated, can't exactly remember what was going on, but I remember carrying the ashes and pouring them into some sacred reservoir. I asked my brother to give emotional support to my mother, for I didn't have the courage to. I left stating I had job interviews in other cities. Well, the truth was, I was homeless and jobless now. But I still had the degree, so I went to Bengaluru to look for a job. Well, I got one quick owing to my degree, but it was a call center kind job. While I had no complaints that time, I felt it was just the beginning and I had a long way to go. I had broken contact with every single friend I made in college, 'cause I felt utterly ashamed to talk to them. On one hand, where I was struggling to make ends meet, they were earning lakhs and crores in metropolitan cities around the globe, while some still tried calling me. Others, while they felt it was a waste of time, I believe, gave up to build contact again. I remained at the job for 2 years, living in a tenant-like house, occasionally calling at home. Every time I called, my mother broke into tears requesting me to come back home. Well, I thought she was just being emotional. Little did know she had been detected as a last-stage cancer patient and wanted to spend her remaining time with 2 of her kids. She never told me or my brother. I kept ignoring her calls. One day I received another call from an unknown number. It was my brother telling me the worst news I could hear at that time: I lost my mother as well. It was all over for me. I felt I had hit rock bottom, and I couldn't accept the reality. Anyway, went back home to perform the rituals. It was the last time I visited home and was with my family. Fortunately, my brother had already gotten into a prestigious university, which was being financed by my relatives, aunts and uncles. I wished my brother good luck and left. As my cab was taking the turn to the other road, I looked back for the last time, saw my helpless brother standing, and had flashbacks of all the amazing times we spent when he was just a little kid. Well, for me, he was still a little kid. Wanted to hug him, but I restrained myself 'cause I thought he might hate me. But I remember when the last time I looked into his eyes, he wanted me to stay. I too wanted to stay with him as an emotional support, but with little to no money, I didn't want to be a burden to my relatives, fearing they might abandon us altogether. Hence, I left. Enough of the past, let's get to the present. As I said, I left my job and am now planning to leave the city, but nowhere to go. My degree is of no use currently as I'm 30 years old. Everyone wants a skilled guy to work at their company at this age. Well, my brother never contacted me since that day, nor did I. I didn't want to be that useless guy who would waste his precious time, though my heart was dying to talk to him. Anyway, I got to know that he got placed in a company with a great package abroad. I felt happy for him, and I hope he gets a wonderful life ahead, forgetting all the nightmares he faced at such a young age. Well, what now for me, moving on to the next phase of life. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.